Welcome back to English Echo Daily. Real English, real life, every single day. Today's topic is one that I don't think gets talked about nearly enough. And when it does come up, people are almost surprised by how much they feel it. We're talking about adult friendships, why they're so hard to build, why the ones you had seem to quietly disappear, and what real, deep connection actually requires.
And before we get into it, question for the comments right now. Think honestly. Do you feel like you have the kind of friendships where you can call someone at 2 in the morning if something goes wrong? Or do you feel a little more alone than you'd like to admit? Tell us in the comments. No judgment at all. This one hits a lot of people harder than they expect.
Okay, so let's start with something that I think a lot of adults feel but rarely say out loud. At some point, maybe in your mid-20s, maybe your 30s, maybe even earlier, you looked around and realized that making new friends had become genuinely hard. Not impossible, but hard in a way it never was when you were younger. And you might have wondered if something was wrong with you, if you'd become too closed off, too busy, too set in your ways.
And the answer, almost certainly, is no. Nothing is wrong with you. Making friends as an adult is objectively harder than making friends as a child or a teenager. And there are very specific structural reasons for that. Reasons that have nothing to do with your personality or your likability. Understanding those reasons doesn't solve the problem, but it does remove a lot of unnecessary self-blame.
So what are those reasons? The first and biggest one is proximity. When you're in school, you are placed in a room with the same group of people 5 days a week for years. You didn't choose them, you didn't have anything in common with most of them, but you were there, together, repeatedly. And that repetition is the foundation of almost every early friendship. Researchers call it the mere exposure effect. Familiarity itself creates liking. You become comfortable with people simply by being around them enough.
And as an adult, that structure disappears. You go to work, you come home, you might see the same colleagues every day, but there are unspoken rules about professional distance. You go to the gym, but everyone has headphones in. You move to a new city and there's no institution that automatically puts you in a room with the same people every single week. The infrastructure for friendship just isn't there anymore.
The second reason is time, and I don't just mean being busy, although that's real. I mean that as an adult, your discretionary time, the time that's genuinely yours to spend however you want, shrinks dramatically. Work, family, relationships, errands, health, sleep, and what's left over has to compete with the option of just resting at home. Going out, making the effort to see someone, being social, it has an energy cost. And on a lot of nights, that cost feels too high.
And the third reason, and I think this is the most interesting one, is vulnerability. Children make friends easily partly because they haven't yet learned to protect themselves the way adults have. They just walk up to someone and say, "Do you want to be my friend?" with zero embarrassment. They share everything immediately, they cry in front of each other, fight, and then 5 minutes later they're playing again. There's an openness and unself-consciousness that makes connection happen fast.
And adults have lost most of that. Years of social experience have taught us to be careful, to manage impressions, to not reveal too much too soon, to keep the armor on until we're sure it's safe to take it off. And that armor, which protects us from real pain, also keeps real connection at a distance.
So you end up with a lot of adult relationships that stay permanently at a certain depth. Friendly, pleasant, enjoyable even, but never quite close. You never get past the surface because neither person is willing to go first. And so both people leave every interaction feeling a little more connected than strangers, but not actually known. And that gap between being liked and being known is, I think, one of the loneliest places a person can live.
That is such a precise way to put it. Being liked but not known. Because likability is easy. You can be warm and funny and interesting and still be completely alone in the sense that matters. The sense of being truly seen by someone, truly understood. Someone who knows your actual fears and your actual failures and your actual self, not just the version you present.
And I think a lot of people are carrying a quiet loneliness that they would never describe that way because they have people around them. They have colleagues and acquaintances and people to make plans with, but there's no one they can fully exhale with, no one who gets them all the way. And they've normalized that to such a degree that they've stopped even recognizing it as loneliness.
There's actually research on this that I find both fascinating and a little alarming. Studies on loneliness consistently show that it's not about how many people you have around you. It's about the quality of connection. You can be lonely in a marriage. You can be lonely with 100 acquaintances. And conversely, you can feel deeply connected with just 2 or 3 people who really know you. The number is almost irrelevant. The depth is everything.
So what actually creates depth? What makes a difference between an acquaintance and a real friend? Because I think if we can answer that, we can actually do something about it.
I think it comes down to 3 things. The first is time. Not just any time, but unstructured time. Time where you're not doing something together, but just being together. No agenda, no activity, nowhere to be, just presence. And that kind of time is increasingly rare for adults because we've scheduled everything. Every meeting, every dinner, every social interaction has a beginning and an end and a purpose. But a lot of the best moments in friendship happen in the in-between, in the conversation that starts after the plan was supposed to end.
The second is reciprocal vulnerability, which means one person goes a little deeper than the surface and the other person meets them there. Not with advice, not with a pivot to their own story, but with genuine engagement. Tell me more about that. And then they share something real in return. And each time that happens, the trust deepens a little. The friendship moves to a new level. It's not a dramatic thing, it's incremental. But it has to happen and it has to go both ways.
And this is where a lot of adult friendships stall, because someone takes the first step, shares something real, shows a bit of vulnerability, and the other person gets uncomfortable and changes the subject, or immediately deflects with humor, or offers a quick fix to avoid sitting in the discomfort of genuine emotion. And the person who opened up learns, don't do that here. And the friendship stays shallow.
So being the person who can receive someone else's vulnerability, calmly, warmly, without flinching, is actually one of the most important friendship skills there is, and it's one almost no one explicitly teaches.
The third thing is consistency over time. Not intensity, not grand gestures, just showing up regularly over a long period. Checking in when you don't need anything. Remembering the thing they mentioned 3 weeks ago and asking about it. Being reliably present in small ways. Because friendship, at its core, is a form of paying attention. And the people who make you feel most known are almost always the people who have been paying attention to you, quietly and consistently, for a long time.
And I think this is where the loneliness epidemic in modern life has its roots. Not in the absence of people, but in the erosion of consistency. We move cities, we change jobs, we have less unstructured time. Our attention is constantly fragmented by technology. And all of those things work against the slow, quiet accumulation of shared experience that deep friendship is actually made of.
So, what do you actually do if you want to build or rebuild that kind of connection in your life? Because I think it's easy to hear all of this and feel a little hopeless. Like the conditions for real friendship are so difficult that it's almost not worth trying.
And I want to push back on that feeling because I don't think it's accurate. I think it's harder, but harder is not impossible. And I think the first move is the simplest and the most overlooked one. Invest more deliberately in the friendships you already have. Not new ones, the existing ones that have drifted. The person you used to be close to and have slowly fallen out of touch with. The colleague who you always think you should get to know better. Sometimes the friendship you're looking for is already there, just dormant, waiting for someone to show up.
And showing up doesn't have to be elaborate. A voice message instead of a text, a specific invitation instead of the perpetual "we should hang out sometime." Actually asking how someone is and then waiting for the real answer instead of accepting "good, you" as the end of the conversation. These are small things, but they signal something important. I'm here. I see you. You matter to me.
If this episode is landing for you, if you're thinking about your own friendships as we talk, hit the like button right now. It genuinely helps us reach more people who need this kind of content. Thank you.
And for building new friendships, which is harder but absolutely possible, the key is repeated exposure in a context that allows for real conversation. Not a bar where it's too loud to hear each other, not a one-off event where you'll never see the same people again, but something recurring. A class you take every week, a running group, a book club, a volunteer commitment. Something that puts you in contact with the same people repeatedly over time. And then you do the work of going a little deeper than the surface every chance you get.
And you accept that it's slow, that real friendship is built in months and years, not in a single great conversation, and that the awkward stage where you're not quite friends yet, but you're not strangers either, is not a sign that it won't work. It's just the process. You have to be willing to stay in that uncomfortable middle zone long enough for something real to form.
And I think the deepest thing I want to say about all of this is, being a good friend requires being willing to be known, not just knowing others, actually letting someone in, Sharing the parts of yourself that aren't polished, the doubts, the failures, the fears you don't usually say out loud, because those are the parts that create real connection. The perfect version of you is likable. The real version of you is lovable. And there's a significant difference.
The perfect version is likable. The real version is lovable. I think that's probably the most important sentence in this whole conversation.
And it requires courage, every time. Even with people you've known for years, even with people you trust, there is always a moment of risk in being real, and it never fully goes away. But neither does the reward. That feeling of being with someone who actually knows you, who has seen the messy parts and stayed, that is one of the best things a human life can contain.
One of the best things. Okay, before we say goodbye, subscribe to English Echo Daily if you haven't yet. A brand new episode every single day. Real conversations, real topics, real English that moves your level in ways textbooks never will.
And our final question for the comments. Is there someone in your life, a friend, an old friend, someone you've been meaning to reach out to, who you could contact this week? Not tomorrow, this week. Tell us who it is. You don't need to use their name. And what's been stopping you from reaching out?
See you tomorrow.
Take care. Bye.